Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're looking at Executive Order 14161.
Right. The official title is Protecting the United States from Foreign Terrorists and Other National Security and Public Safety Threats. Quite a mouthful.
It really is. Signed January 2025, and then it showed up in the Federal Register about 10 days later, January 30th.
Yep. So our goal today is to sort of unpack what this order actually does, what it sets out to achieve.
Exactly. And at its core, it's really about policy to protect the U.S. from certain individuals.
People intending to commit terrorist acts or, pose other security risks, espouse hateful ideologies.
Or even just exploit immigration laws for, well, bad intentions.
It definitely signals a move towards much more intense scrutiny, both for people trying to get in and those already here.
So Section 1 kicks things off with policy and purpose. It's pretty direct.
Yeah, it states the policy is protecting citizens from these harmful actors and ensuring folks who are admitted don't hold hostile views or support foreign threats.
And it really emphasizes identifying threats before entry. Proactive, not reactive.
Which makes sense, right? You want to catch potential issues early. But it also mentions addressing risks from people already inside the U.S.
So it's a two-pronged approach, really, before entry and after.
It kind of sets the stage for the next section, which gets more into the how.
Right, Section 2, enhanced vetting and screening across agencies. This seems to be where the operational directives really kick in.
Absolutely. It tells the Secretary of State, working with Homeland Security, the DNI, the Attorney General, basically all the key players, to immediately figure out how to maximize vetting and screening resources for everyone seeking admission or, again, already here.
So step 1 is sort of an inventory check. See what tools we have and use them fully.
Pretty much. And also figure out what more information they need from other countries.
Ah, the international cooperation piece.
Yeah.
For verifying identity and assessing risk.
Exactly. Like getting a more complete background check, you could say, which, isn't always easy depending on the country.
Definitely. Now, this part's interesting. It says reestablish a uniform baseline for screening, specifically like the standards from January 19, 2021.
That date is significant. That's just before the administration changed.
Right. So it suggests a deliberate rollback to a previous set of standards. It makes you want to know, well, what were those standards exactly?
It really does. It implies those earlier standards are seen as perhaps more robust or appropriate now. A definite policy signal there.
And the order says maximize this vetting for everyone, but especially focus on people from regions with known security risks.
A targeted approach based on threat assessments, which of course raises its own set of questions about fairness and profiling, even if it's based on intelligence.
Fair point. Then there's this 60-day deadline for a joint report to the president.
Yes, and that report has two main jobs. First, identify countries where the U.S. can't get good vetting information.
The ones where the info is deficient, as the order puts it.
Right. And these could be countries whose nationals might face admission suspensions under INA Section 212.
Just for context, 212. Is that part of the Immigration and Nationality Act that gives the president pretty broad power to restrict entry if it's deemed harmful to U.S. interests?
Exactly. So this report could directly lead to travel restrictions.
Okay, what's the second part of the report?
It needs to tally up how many people from those specific countries have actually entered the U.S. since January 20, 2021.
Another significant date reference there.
Yes. And not just the numbers, but any relevant info on what they've been doing since they arrived. It's a look back.
Wow, that sounds like a huge data task.
Yeah.
Trying to connect past entries from certain places to potential current risks.
It seems so. And then, based on that report, the Secretary of Homeland Security is told to act fast.
To exclude or remove people identified as risks.
Generally, yes. But there are exceptions, like if removing them would mess up a major investigation or prosecution.
Or if just not in the U.S. national security interest overall.
Right. So there's some discretion, but the default seems to be action based on the report's findings.
Okay, so that covers the big interagency vetting push. What about Section 3? Additional measures to protect the nation.
Right. And this stuff has an even faster 30-day deadline for evaluation and recommendations.
30 days. Okay, what's on that list?
First, review and maybe tweak the rules around inadmissibility, the reasons someone can be legally barred entry. Specifically, the parts about crime and security threats in the INA.
So potentially tightening those legal grounds.
That seems to be the goal, yeah?
Mm.
Ensure they're strong enough. Then there's a specific point about refugees and stateless people.
What about them?
Making sure identity verification for them is extra stringent. more so than the standard requirements.
Which I guess reflects the difficulty sometimes in verifying documents or history for those populations.
Exactly. It acknowledges that unique challenge. The order also wants an evaluation of all visa programs
All of them. Why?
to see how they might be exploited by, say, foreign governments or hostile groups to harm U.S. interests, security, economic, political, even cultural.
That's incredibly broad, looking for vulnerabilities across the board.
It is. Then there's a really complex one. Recommend actions to protect fundamental constitutional rights like free speech and religion
Protect them from whom?
from foreign nationals who might try to undermine them or who preach sectarian violence or advocate overthrowing U.S. culture or support terrorists.
That sounds like a very tricky line to walk.
Hmm.
How do you target that kind of activity without chilling legitimate speech or belief?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a real balancing act with potential First Amendment implications, even for non-citizens in some contexts.
Okay, what else is in Section 3?
Ensuring enough resources for prosecuting certain citizenship-related offenses, and then evaluating immigrant assimilation programs.
Assimilation. That's a term with a lot of history.
It is. The order asks for an evaluation of how effective these programs are and recommendations to promote a unified American identity and attachment to U.S. principles.
That's potentially controversial. Defining a unified American identity is something people have debated for centuries.
Absolutely. It touches on deep questions about multiculturalism versus a more unified national culture. What does assimilation mean today? How is it measured? Who decides?
Lots to unpack there. Anything else in this section?
Just a final catch-all point. Recommend any other actions needed to protect the U.S. from foreign threats. So it leaves the door open.
Got it. So a mix of specific reviews and broader mandates. Then Section 4 is the general provisions, usually standard legal stuff.
Pretty much. It clarifies the order doesn't override existing laws or agency authorities or OMB functions.
And implementation depends on the law and available funding, which is standard.
Right. And crucially, it states the order doesn't create any new legal rights that someone could sue over.
Okay, that's typical for EOs. They direct the executive branch. They don't usually create private rights of action.
Exactly.
So if we zoom out, Executive Order 14161 is essentially a directive to significantly ramp up national security vetting and screening.
Yes, across multiple agencies, with specific reports and reviews demanded on pretty tight timelines. It emphasizes identifying threats both before and after entry.
It definitely shows a strong focus on proactive threat identification and mitigation.
And, thinking about everything we've just discussed, the enhanced screening, the focus on specific regions, and especially that language around assimilation and a unified American identity, it really makes you consider the bigger picture. What are the potential long-term societal effects when policies lean heavily into this kind of security posture and cultural cohesion ideal?
That's a great point. What are those challenges in actually defining, let alone promoting, a single unified American identity in a country built on diversity and individual freedom?
Exactly. It's a fundamental tension, and this order brings it right back into focus. Something for you, the listener, to really think about beyond just the procedural details.